Well, we're all set. The Ashes start this week. England and Australia face off once more.
No, is it the Ashes? Yes, England have won the Ashes.
It's gone straight into the confectionery stall and out again.
Ben Stokes, here he comes, he bowls and he's flogged that away into leg side. That should go for four. The fielder down, they can't get it. And Ben Stokes has reached a truly remarkable 100.
Here comes Warren Bowles, and he's got it, there it is, he's got it, and Strauss came forward to play him, away to leg, was beaten in the air. Horn has taken his 700th wicket, and Strauss walks disconsolately away.
Sits around the corner, there's hesitation as a misfield, and he gets the run, and he's made 200 in a test match against Australia. That is a wonderful achievement from Alistair Cook.
A huge boos ring out around the ground for Steve Smith's 50.
Bowls to David Warner, who's hit on the pad. Appeal goes out. Warner's out. And Broad gets his man. He could have had him first ball. And, there's the Hollies stand for you as David Warner rips off his glove.
And Flintoff goes roaring in again. He's there, he bowls to Ponting. Oh my word, he's caught behind. Is he there? Yes, he is. He's caught behind. A fabulous over by Andrew Flintoff.
Anderson's bowled and it's all over. Australia have won magnificently.
As Cummins bowls now and he steps away his ball. What a ghastly dismissal, which really sums it up. Nowhere near it, couldn't reach the ball. Stumps are shattered and Australia have bowled England out.
Two former England internationals in Ebony Rain for Brent and Phil Tufnell, head coach of Sussex, who looks like he's in the dressing room or maybe the media centre down there. Paul Farbrace, where are you? In the media centre, Paul?
Yeah, media centre I am, yes indeed.
Right. Has it been a long, hot day?
It has, yes, with a couple of wobbles along the way, so nice to finally get the day finished.
Good. So Paul is in Hove and Jeff Lemon, the journalist, is with us as well. Do you feel outnumbered, Jeff?
Well, a little outnumbered in terms of playing experience, more so than nationality at this point, because everybody else has had a lengthy CV and I'm just the mug who sits here and watches and talks about it.
Well, I'm with you. We have shared interest there. I mean, I'm the mug that also just sits here and talks about it. There's no international experience on my part either. So
good to know.
We're together at least, if not on nationality. Solidarity. Ebony, you excited?
I am. Me and Tuffers and Jeff have just been kind of talking for the last 20 minutes about this exciting encounter, and I think just with the way Test cricket's gone with Ben Stokes' new brand of cricket, Bazball, all the talk, and there's been a lot of tests, but we just saw Ireland pass and Bazball works against them, but I think the Australians is just a completely different kettle of fish. The competitiveness, careers are going to be made or lost on this whole series, so I am absolutely buzzing. I can't wait for it to start, to be honest. Let's get going.
Do you think it's history, Jeff, that makes it so special?
I mean, there's history and there's a new spin on history. Like, yes, you're going back nearly 150 years, and as a sideline, I think it's great that the story is starting to bubble around that we'll have a 150th anniversary test match in 2027. That hasn't been formalised yet, but Cricket Australia is talking to the ECB about it. They had the centenary test in 1977, so they'll look to repeat that 150 years on. But it's also that this is that bit different. Coming into the Ashes, there's always anticipation, but we haven't seen what we've seen from this England team in the last year or so, the willingness to just really roar into contests and take them on. And then you've got an Australian team that's just been crowned World Test champions. So, I mean, it's as juicy as it can get.
Right, you managed to get that in within five minutes of doing the show. But the thing with it, Paul, is no matter, and look, as we know, for many years that the men's team were miles behind the Australians in the late 80s and into the 90s. But no matter what standard either side has been at, the anticipation has still been there. The expectation has still been there.
Absolutely, and I think that's always the great thing about an Ashes series. It doesn't matter what's gone before, you always get excited, you always look forward to it. But genuinely, this could be one of the best Ashes series we'll have ever seen. England are playing some of the best cricket they've ever played. Australia look a fantastic side, and I don't see a draw taking place the way that both teams play. I just can't see a game finishing in a draw unless the bad weather ruins the game. But this could be one of the best Ashes series ever.
We'll look ahead at what's coming very shortly, but I just want to go back to the 1990s toughest, because that
lovely. Thanks, mate.
Because you made your Test debut at the MCG on Boxing Day.
What a nice little easy way to just sort of ease your way into your Test career. Yeah, go and have a go out there at the MCG in front of about 90,000.
Were you wide-eyed when you came out?
Well, I don't actually remember my first couple of deliveries I bowled, actually. I got thrown this sort of dog ball by Graham Gooch, and it was the old Kookaburra with all the seam was just dotted and all the quarter seam was sort of whole, and I've just gone, oh my life, what am I going to do with that? And anyway, Dean Jones was batting, God bless him, and the first couple of balls, I don't actually remember it. It was just a bit on autopilot, and then the third ball, he used to like coming down the track, old Dino, and he's come down the track and he's whacked one back at me, which hit me right on the ankle point, on the inside of my ankle. And I went, and I've sort of woken up. But no, it was an amazing atmosphere. And, from where I was playing, perhaps down at Uxbridge or wherever, to be walking out at the MCG. It's amazing. Another thing just about the Ashes, I'm going to say, it's the rivalry, isn't it? It's the rivalry between the two teams and the two fellas. Because as a cricketer, I think that your CV is judged on how you do against Australia. Let's be fair. You know what I mean? That's what sort of takes you, to another level. You don't remember a great 70 against perhaps Sri Lanka or someone, no disrespect to Sri Lanka, but you know what I mean, a fantastic match-winning 150 against the Aussies. That stays with you for your life, and that's how people sort of recognise you as a cricketer. So, really, really looking forward to it. I think it's going to be an absolute ding-dong.
But also, we're desperate for rivalries, aren't we? We want things to mean something, and you could argue, Paul. I know we've got the World Test Championship now, obviously, as Jeff has mentioned. But in the past, you could argue there would be some series that England would play, and if you were talking to a non-cricket fan, you would struggle to really make them understand the meaning of it, because it was just a Test series and you move on. Whereas there has always been meaning here. Does that make and a rivalry? Does that make sense?
Yeah, and the rivalry is the great thing, isn't it? I mean, it's interesting hearing Tuffers talking then about how, different games mean different things. Going winning in the subcontinent is a fantastic experience for an England cricketer to go and do, but to win in the Ashes and the rivalry that there is between the two teams, it is the thing that sets this contest apart. And that's the thing that, as you say, it doesn't matter what's gone before, it doesn't matter. The Ashes is just something very special about the Ashes series, and it does grab people's attention. You think back to 2005. I mean, that grabbed people's attention, and people that had never watched the game of cricket were suddenly excited and interested in what was a fantastic series, and it's kicked on from there. And there's been so many great moments in Ashes series that do draw you. And Tuffers is absolutely right. It is something that players, that their career. It is remembered for their performances in an Ashes series.
Was that rivalry there, Ebony, as well? I mean, your first time when you faced Australia was an ODI in February 2007, which wasn't branded, was it, as the Ashes at that stage? It wasn't multi-format as it is now. But was that rivalry built into you as well?
Yeah, I think I was a bit naive. I'd heard about the Australians and what sort of energy they brought. And I remember kind of going out to my first experience and facing Catherine Fitzpatrick, who anyone who's known, she's arguably one of the quickest bowlers ever, and bowled for Australia, had a similar action to Brett Lee. I think they had the similar coach. And I've gone out there naively, just looking to tap it around. I did my best to try and get on the front foot and drive one through. Didn't get through the covers. And all of a sudden, she turned it on and she's running in, charging in. Next ball's hitting me in the collarbone. I'm having to kind of go, what's going on here? I wasn't ready for it. And I think what I've learned over the years playing against Australia, watching them, is just how competitive they are. They don't give you anything. There's no niceties. Some teams you play and, when you're in a series, you can go and have a cup of tea with them or chat. At some points, there's nothing. They give you nothing. They dry you up and they make you psychologically as well start to question yourself. And I felt that from my first experience playing Australia. And then over the years, they just come at you. And so I think that's what also makes it quite spicy. Everything, behind the scenes. I heard Jimmy Anderson is not interested in making mates with the Australians. They're going to be, while the series is on, everybody, doesn't matter if they play in franchise cricket, it's going to be spicy, and they're going to really crank that up and get into the emotions of it, and I really love that.
The other thing, though, on the reverse side of that, Ebbs, though, is that, okay, when the game is on, okay, that's fair enough, and everyone, particularly doesn't get on very well, things like that. But then you do like them.
Yeah,
you like them. I like them.
Really?
I do.
Well, you have respect.
Well, yeah, but then also you are sitting there going, you know what I mean? Well, I kind of wished he was on my side. No, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind him scoring a few for us.
Yes, you know what I mean? And that's another kind of thing that just adds to it a little bit as well. That these kind of, there is a huge respect for each other, even if none is given, if you know what I'm trying to say there, chap.
You're the only people on the inside of it, I guess. All of the rest of us are sitting outside watching the 22 in the middle. So even though you're opposed to each other, there's still this fraternity, there's still this connection that you're the only ones who know what it's like to be in the spotlight, to be inside that bubble and have all that pressure on you of being in the series.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's a lovely place. It's a wonderful place to be. There's no better, I think there's no better game that I've played in than an Ashes game.
Ebony, Jeff, mentioned Jimmy Anderson's comment about, not wanting to be friends with them. But actually, it doesn't feel, in the build-up to this one, there's been that much of sort of jousting with the opposition on either side.
Yes, I think there's a lot of respect actually for the quality of play. I listened to an interview on BBC the other day. Actually, David Warner was talking about the battle with Stuart Broad, and they were talking about how much they respect each other. Or, I've heard Stokes talk about Smith, and there's a lot of respect. I think these players, the slight difference over time now, I guess, with franchise cricket, they do get more chance to know each other, but equally you cannot help but realising these are some of the best players in the world. Jimmy Anderson is one of the best bowlers, Steve Smith one of the best and greatest. There are some greats of all time in both sides, and so even though there is that, they're going to get fired up. There is that respect, and so I think from my perspective that it does make it a little bit different. There isn't that sometimes, before series, I've seen it in the women's series as well, them some spicy words. I think they all want to let the cricket do the talking.
And I think there has been a genuine cultural change in this Australian team, the way they are at the moment, captained by Pat Cummins, who is determined to be reasonable. That's kind of the first thing that he brings to just about everything. And since 2018, since being embarrassed in front of the world, like initially people weren't sure if this was genuine, like the Australians were trying to look like they were doing the right thing and be more upstanding citizens. But I think even if you're faking it, if you live that for long enough, it starts to become more genuine, and that seems to be more a natural way that most of these players behave. I hate to tell an English audience that the Australians are likeable, but most of the Australian players are quite likeable. They're not horrible people anymore, and they used to sort of carry on like pillocks and have to and sort of embarrass themselves by trying to be ultra aggressive all the time verbally, off field, on field, all the lead up chat, all the rest of it. I think that's why we haven't seen that. We haven't seen them getting stuck into England because they don't want to be those kind of people anymore, and they're not really naturally. These players aren't those kind of characters.
Well, I was with JL this morning having a little chat with Justin, and we had a great time. We sort of saw each other across a crowded room and sort of like ran into each other's
eyes met.
I know. I mean, it's amazing. I think also it's when you're not in it, and he was sort of discussing that as well about how much he's enjoying now not being coach. You know what I mean? When he was being coach, I mean, crikey, there was a lot of pressure, a lot of noise going on, and what have you. And he said, I was doing some work with Nasser Hussain. It's like he's my best mate now, you know what I mean? And so it's just funny how it all turns around.
Paul, you look like you're going to come in.
I was just going to say, 2015 Ashes, the first test was at Cardiff. Trevor Bayliss was coach of England. It was his first test match. He had 8 of the New South Wales side in the Australian team. He was so looking forward to seeing them. And on the first day, they all ignored him. And he came to me heartbroken. He said, they've been told not to speak to me. They're not allowed to speak to me. And he was absolutely gutted. And Brad Haddon was the first one to break it. We passed on the stairs and he said, sorry, mate, I'm not allowed to talk to you. And that was the first words that were spoken to him. And at the end of it, we won the game and we let it out to the media on purpose that we'd invited the Aussies in for a drink at the end of the game, and they turned us down and said they wouldn't have a drink with us to the end of the series. And it did mellow during the course of that series, but it has changed, and franchise cricket's played a big part in that as well. But 2015 they ignored him for probably the first 3 test matches and just refused to speak to him. He was heartbroken, poor bloke.
Do you think, Paul, that coaching and environment has changed? I mean, I know there's the franchise cricket, as you and Ebony have talked about, but actually, now we are expecting every coach seems to want to create an environment where a player can be themselves, and therefore, if you are reasonable and a nice guy, or laid back, or genuine, then people are actually going to laugh at you if you turn out to be, if you start acting, to use Jeff's term, like a pillock.
Exactly. I mean, the 2017 Ashes, we went over. David Saker, who has swapped teams more times than I care to remember, on the first morning in Brisbane, I walked across the square and he started backing away from me. I said, "What are you doing?" He said, "Buff will fine me if you come and shake my hand." I said, "I'm going to hug you every day to get you fined." And I chased him around the square for 4 days. And then we went to Adelaide for the day-night game, and I chased him around the square every morning to try and shake his hand. But it was daft, really. But you're absolutely right. How can we now talk about players being themselves and allow them to express themselves and just be who they want to be authentic, if you're then as coaches saying you can't talk to the opposition? And Jeff's absolutely right. Things have changed, and there is no doubt the Australian team have actually got some very likeable characters in their team. Things have changed, and it is for the best.
Yeah.
There's no question. You can be competitive between the hours of 11 and 6. There's no doubt about that. But there's no reason why you shouldn't say well played to people and show your respect for them as an international cricketer. And that's the right thing to do.
Yeah, in the bad old days, it was almost like, you can't be trying hard enough unless you're sort of like shouting and screaming at everyone, or you're not going to get that sort of performance out of yourself unless you're right on the edge and growling and spitting at everyone and everything like that. That has now completely changed in the culture, as we were talking about. It's just about having belief in your own ability, and as you say, shaking hands with people and getting on with it. I think it's such a nicer place to be watching cricket, but you still want that. You still want that intensity.
Only thing I was going to say, though,
you still want an edge.
The only thing I was going to say is the fans. So we're all here talking about how the players have changed. It still gets the English fans will be getting stuck in on that sideline. They bring a lot to, they add to that pressure. And even David Warner was talking about, he knows he was going to be a target, and he said he's going to have to soak up some of that on behalf of the team, because he knows he will get a fair weight of the stick. So there is that spice will still be there, even though the players are much more agreeable. But the atmosphere is going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, the players will still be at it. Don't worry. There'll still be a few chirps knocking about. Don't you worry about that. But, it's the same with the Aussie fans. But, the fans, do they play a big role? I think England will start at Edgbaston. I think it's a good place for England to start, Edgbaston, because of those fans. You say they don't half get behind your team. But, it'd be interesting to see the Hollies get
spicy.
Right, but I think even there, I remember in 2019 when the Hollies was going absolutely feral at Steve Smith, and David Warner's down there turning his pockets inside out and all the rest of it. I went and spent most of a day down in the Hollies just observing to write a piece about it, and I would have had 30 conversations with English fans who were going off their chops over the fence, but they were all completely civil and welcoming to me as an Australian. There was no sort of animosity amongst the spectators. There were Australians down in there in the yellow shirts and giving it back to the English and so on, but then they're buying each other rounds, and there wasn't genuine aggression. Like, so much of it's put on and it's pantomimed.
Getting into the occasion.
And there were a few who were too lubricated at stumps, kind of chasing the bus down the street like dogs, when the Australians were leaving, sort of yelling at the bus. But aside from a handful of them, most of the time there's a collegiality to it. You're all there to play your part in being the spectators, and it's not real anger.
And also, Jeff, if there'd been a drinks break and David Warner had been given a Sharpie, they'd have all been at the front asking for his autograph.
Of course.
So, I mean, that's how it works. By the way, I don't know if the scoreboard operator is still the same person, Paul, as when you were at Edgbaston for 3 years, but the scoreboard today had England, as they were testing it, on 423 for 1, with Ben Duckett having made 326. So
fantastic. That would be a brilliant first day, wouldn't it? What a great day that would be. Wow.
It's better than the scoreboard in one of the tests we were at in India. Had Australia 88 for 7 before anything had kicked off. So.
But let's hear from the England men's captain, shall we? Ben Stokes has sat down with Isha Guha.
Ben, I'm going to start with your leadership. People have said that you're loyal, you're caring, and you're a deep thinker. But has it always been that way, the way that you've led, or has it evolved over time?
Well, I think it has evolved, but I think it's been something that's sort of always been in me, but it's just sort of taking the opportunity to present itself to be able to sort of lead this team. And even before sort of getting together as a test team for the first time with me being captain, it was one simple thing that I said I had to make sure that I was doing, which was just being completely true to myself, how I've sort of gone about my business as a player and transferring that over into being a captain. Because, I played 85 or 86 games before I got made captain, and, the guys who I played with sort of knew me as a person, they knew me as a player, and for me, if I became captain and then started doing things completely different to what they knew me for, I think that would raise a few eyebrows.
There's been a lot of focus on team culture, and I've spoken to Joss about this recently. He said he's been fortunate to be part of some pretty good cultures under Owen and under Joe. What is good culture for you?
A good example, I think, is all the communications I was having with, the players and stuff like that. Just like WhatsApps and especially whilst I was in India, was, we always finished the conversation with, I can't wait to get back with the boys again. So I think when you've got a group of players and, even coaches and support staff who are just so excited to be together as a group again, take the cricket away from it. When you've got a group of people like that who are just so excited to come back and be in each other's company again, that's when you're in a good culture and a good environment.
How do you create that, though?
Well, just make it good fun. Just make it as fun as you can, and just making sure that everything we do is just a good time, whether that be on the field, off the field, the things we do together as a group, just whatever it is, and Baz has been incredible at that. He's been the main advocate of making sure that that's one thing that we stick to regardless of what is going on, in competition, because we're lucky that he's not far long done playing cricket, that in his last sort of part of his career, he can look back on and say, it was just an incredible time I had. And he says, he wished he had that mindset when he first started out playing. So having someone like that to come in and just really, push and advocate that kind of thing away from the game is massive.
It's an exciting time to be an England cricketer at the moment, but I guess sport is a reflection of society, and cricket is undertaking a bit of a reckoning at the moment. So how do you see your role in terms of changing that perception of cricket and the image problem that cricket has sometimes had?
First and foremost, I think you've got to create a place where every individual feels comfortable and safe, to be comfortable in being the person that they are and not feeling like they're having to put on a different face every day to fit in with what they think is required or is needed. What we have there is, you're in a team sport, you've got so many different people in a dressing room that you've got to understand that you're going to have different individuals, you're going to have different characters, you're going to have different personalities. And that's the great thing, is that if you bring all those things together and just accept it for what it is, accept people for who they are, that's going to be a place where people can thrive. And that's an amazing thing that we've able to do. I think what we've done is we've taken a group of players who are obviously very good at what they do, but I think what we've been able to do is just to sort of let them go out and be free. And I think that they've even got up to a point, even now, where I probably think they are better than what they thought they were. And that's just all through a mindset change and allowing people to go out and be who they are on the field and off the field.
I can imagine it's quite an addictive environment to be part of. Did you take it upon yourself then as a captain? You talk about all these unique individuals, to really just understand them better or understand what's going on, behind the scenes for them all. Did you see that as a responsibility as a leader?
I mean, I think I'm like sort of, obviously I've been through, you know, a fair amount, and I think that that sort of allows me to be sort of relatable to loads of different people. Situations like in a game or off the field situations and stuff like that, you know, I just feel as if I just can be quite relatable to people if they've ever got an issue or if they've ever got something. I feel like I'm an approachable person to come and speak to, you know, but I don't go out and like seek it. I will do if I feel like it's a necessary thing to happen, but you know, I'm not someone to just go and be like, right, come on, let's do this, let's do that, you know, because you know, everyone sort of knows sort of what they want and what they need, and you know, I think everyone's wise enough and old enough to know that what they need to do at the time, if that makes sense.
We've heard from Joe Root and Stuart Broad say that the inspiration for last summer was Elvis the film, for you to try and encourage the players to be rock stars. Why Elvis?
So, when his film came out, it was before the Edgbaston test against India, and it was just a complete fluke, really. Like, went and watched it, and there was this one part of the movie where I was just watching it and I was going, oh my God, this is like just literally sort of what sort of I'm like trying to do, and I was just watching it and I was going, I've got to put like this team talk, like just somehow I've got to try and get this movie part that I was on about into the team talk. And then when I said it, it actually made complete sense in my head, so I was like, right, I'm going with it tomorrow. So, you know, team talks, they might all look like we're being dead serious and stuff like that, whereas that one before India I was actually talking about Elvis Presley. Yeah, it's amazing when you see something like that, but it resonates so well and unbelievably well with you as a person that, yeah, I just thought it was a good time to sort of mention something like that. That's why Rooty did that little pinky thing, because that pinky thing's part of in the film.
Yeah, we saw it quite a lot last summer. Let's move on to the cricket. Massive, massive summer up against Australia. This bold new style that England have been playing with for the last 12 months has been very successful. But would you say that this is now your ultimate challenge against Australia?
Ultimate challenge? No. It's another challenge. You know, we know the threat that Australia pose, whoever they play against, are an incredibly good team. But in terms of what we've done, you know, say we found something that works. We found something that has been successful, as you just said there, and you know, that doesn't change with the opposition. What we like to do, and what many other teams will always say, is that they concentrate on themselves way more than what they do in the opposition, but also respecting the opposition and respecting what they do have. Nothing's going to change because we know that we've had unbelievable success with it, and if we were to change anything that we have done over the last 12 months because we find ourselves in the Ashes series, then the last 12 months would be completely pointless.
Tactically though, you've spoken openly about your desire for out-and-out quick bowlers, and those stocks have diminished ever so slightly with Jofra and Ollie Stone out to injury, very sadly, but you still have a world-class attack. So does your want for those hard and fast pitches change now to suit the bowlers that you do have?
So just like obviously having multiple bowlers who are able to bowl at that high pace, any team and any captain or any selector would want to have those, you know, sort of conveyor belt. But that doesn't mean, you know, that I was saying like I want 4 90-mile-an-hour bowlers. We've got James Anderson and Stuart Broad who, you know, just it's incredible what they've done over their career. So it's more around sort of having a sort of, you know, like dynamic bowling attack and having someone in your team who's able to bowl at that high pace is, you know, might be required at some point in this series. And that's something that I feel every team wants, every team needs. So the more of those guys you can have available, the better. But, you know, when you've got James Anderson, Stuart Broad and Ollie Robinson leading your attack, regardless of how fast they bowl, you know, I'm pretty sure anybody would like to have those three in particular.
The ethos and the mantra of this team has been quite process-driven and just about the style that you want to play, and not necessarily results-focused, but what would it mean to win the Ashes?
Before we start playing in the Ashes, obviously we'll do the normal get-together, the normal sort of captain, what you got to say and all that kind of stuff, and I always go back to like a sort of little list, and at the bottom of the list is results. Because if we do everything and stick to everything that we do above that results word, then the result will look after itself. So not being so result driven actually is a great way to sort of just simplify things and bring it back to ourselves as players and bring it back to ourselves as a team around the way that we want to play. Because if we play anywhere near the capability of what we can do and we have a good day, then the result's probably going to be a win. And if we don't play well, and we don't sort of stick to what we know works for us, then the result's going to be a loss. So, putting results at the bottom is just sort of one thing that I'll keep hammering home and making sure that it's about our process and our mindset before anything else.
And I guess you'll have a lot of fun along the way as well.
Every series you play is a great occasion for England. You got the Ashes now, which is just another occasion for us, and you've got to have fun in these times, because when the day that you finish and the day you retire and you're not able to have this feeling again of being in the dressing room with your other teammates, or walking out at Lord's, walking out at Edgbaston in front of that crowd, at Headingley in front of that crowd, you'll always look back and go, I wish I just tried to enjoy it a little bit more. So there's no chance that we're going to have that in particular in this time, because got myself and Baz making sure that everyone comes in and just make sure that everything we do is with a smile on our face and we're having a good time on the field and off the field.
Ben, thanks very much for your time and all the best for the summer.
Thanks very much.
Ben Stokes with Isha Guha. I feel like I could do 2 hours just on Ben Stokes after that. Is he a head coach's dream captain, Paul Farbrace?
Absolutely. It's really interesting because 2015 I looked after the New Zealand test at Lord's and promoted him to bat number 6, and he got 90 odd and 100, and everyone said afterwards that was genius. And I said no, the more responsibility you give him, the more you get out of Ben Stokes. And I remember saying that after the game. We won the game. He bowled brilliantly. He bowled unbelievably well on the last day to win the game as well. Got Brendan McCullum out, actually, I think first ball. Bowled him off his thigh pad. But the more responsibility you give Ben, the better he is. And Trevor Bayliss was asked in Bangladesh one year, when Ruti was about to take on the captaincy, who else in the England team could do the job? And he said Ben Stokes. And the entire media corps all fell about laughing. And he said, what are you laughing at? I'm absolutely serious. He is a leader. He said, when he goes to the gym, people follow. When he goes for food, people want to go with him. When he goes out to bat, people want to watch him. People want to bat. He is a genuine leader. And that's what leadership is about. And you can see that in the way that this team get behind him. But the one thing that he's got, which every captain needs to have in any successful team, is trust. And people trust him. They trust the way that he leads. They trust the way that he talks. And last summer, people were talking about him being reckless with the way that he batted at times and got out. But he was trying to show the team it's safe to play that way. Play how you want to play, and you will stay in the team. If you play for yourself, don't be surprised if you're left out. So I think he is the absolute, your head coach's absolute ideal dream of a leader of a group of people.
Yeah, also Farbs as well. What I've been... I'm sorry, Chappers. Also, what I want to talk to Farbs as well is that tactically on the field, I've been so impressed with him. Bowling changes, keeping men up, keeping catches. Bazball isn't just all about going out there and whacking it with the bat. It's about getting 20 wickets as quick as you can. And I think he goes about that beautifully. I mean, just look at Jack Leach. Obviously not going to be there, which is a shame. But, I think tactically... he's nailed it sometimes. It's been incredible as a captain.
Absolutely. I think he has been brilliant. I mean, in the Pakistan series, away this winter, some of his captaincy, some of the fields that he set and the way he got bowlers to bowl was absolutely outstanding. But he's always had a brilliant cricket brain. In a team meeting, you virtually knew that after about 15 or 30 seconds he'd switched off. He wasn't interested in listening to people talking about how we got people out, all that sort of stuff. Ben was a game player. He's a game player. He plays the game. He's very astute. He works out very quickly what's happening in the game and what does the team need from him at that moment in time. And as a captain, he does exactly the same. He's a game player that relies on his instincts and plays the game on his instincts. And he, because of that, he is able to make changes very, very quickly because his cricket brain is absolutely outstanding.
Yeah, and what he did in Pakistan as well that I saw on very, very flat, benign pitches as well, is that he just put his fielders in the places where he thought the ball was going to go in the air. There wasn't particularly any sort of 3 slips, 2 gullies, this, that and the other. He just sort of felt where the ball was in the air and he put a couple of feathers there. I mean, it sounds kind of simple, really.
But that's instinct, isn't it? that is instinct, though, isn't it? That's the instinct that he plays with, and he allows others to go with him. And what he's done is, with his bowlers, he's changed the mindset of, you hear Broad and Anderson talking about they've never enjoyed playing Test match cricket so much. They've never enjoyed being able to play the game the way they want to play. And for so many years, we used to talk about the fact that Jimmy and Stuart bowled a yard too short.
Yeah.
We don't hear that anymore.
No.
We don't hear those conversations. They bowl to the fields that they're now comfortable bowling to. But he, as I say, not only is he a brilliant people person, and everybody knows that Ben Stokes always puts team first. It's never about Ben Stokes. It's always about the team. And if you've got a leader that cares about the team first and foremost, who plays on his instincts and is a great people person and gets the best out of people, you've got an unbelievable combination as a captain, haven't you?
Yeah. Farbs, I just want to pick up quickly. You've got a very good kit on there down at Sussex, haven't you?
Do you know, the one great thing is that black shirts do make you look as though you've lost a fraction of weight. And there is no way in the world we're going to light colours next year,
It's hot in this heat, though.
It's a bit of
It is very hot, but I don't care about that.
There's a bit of camo there as well.
When you talked about Anderson and Broad there, Mike Brearley's, or Matt Dickinson rather, has done a brilliant interview with Mike Brearley that was in the Times yesterday, on Monday. He talks about Anderson and Broad, and he says one of the things with Stokes is he's got the bowlers willing to agree that they'll bowl to an attacking field to try to get the breakthrough, and they don't mind too much about going for runs. Now, that's a big change for Anderson and Broad. Terrific bowlers, but they have, in his words, always had a quarter of an eye on their analysis. So actually, even by changing things with Broad and Anderson, that's down to man management as well, to get them to buy into it.
100% it is, and that's his. That is one of his great skills. His man management, the way that he gets the best out of people, the way that he allows players to be authentic, to be who they want to be, but to change the mindset of two people like Stuart and Jimmy, who've played for a long, long time, to change their mindset and to encourage them to be more positive and aggressive and enjoy what comes with it. I can hear him saying to them, look, if it goes well, you take the credit. If it doesn't go well, I'll take the blame. That's the sort of captain that he is, and that's how he leads people, and people want to play for him. He's one of those blokes that you want to earn his respect as well. You want him to lead you. You want him to say, come on, this is how we're going to play. And it's a fantastic combination, him and Brendan McCullum together. I mean, it really is. And it's so easy to talk about playing how you want to play and be authentic. But in international sport, when you're judged on results, and to hear Ben talking about results is the bottom of his list, when you know you're being judged on results, it is an unbelievable. It really is incredible the way they get the team playing, the way they get them playing, because we've all tried it in the past, let's be honest, but we haven't always been that successful in doing it. And actually, to get people to follow you and to trust you, it's an incredible effort with what they've done with this team.
What do the Aussies think of him, Jeff?
Yeah, it's an interesting one.
As a leader.
Because... So I think with Australian cricket, with people who follow it, they have a slightly insular view. They don't pay a lot of attention to what happens outside Australia for the most part, aside from the real badges. And a tour to England is the exception. People do pay a lot of attention to that more broadly. But even so, if you perform well in England as an English player, a lot of Australians will say, oh, well, sure, you did well at home. What really counts is, can you come to Australia and play well? And so the fact that he rocked up on his first trip in 2013-14 when England got absolutely battered and, excuse me, made that 100 at the WACA, took 5 wickets in the next test, I think people have been impressed with how he's willing to take on the fight.
You sound very emotional about it, Jeff. I'll just
get into it.
Just extremely, I was just tearing up for a minute there, just thinking of...
I can't wait for the Edgbaston opening ball. You're going to be feeling it.
Just trying to praise an England captain just stuck in my throat.
I wonder, Ebony, as well, whether there's an element of whatever happens for Ben Stokes now, he's comfortable with his... We always use this phrase legacy, don't we? But look, if they win the Ashes, he's even, he's even more of an England cricket hero. If they don't, he's still done a remarkable thing with his career. He's at a stage in his life where I sense, having only spoken to him a couple of times, that he's very comfortable with who he is.
Yeah, when listening to the interview actually with Isha, the number one thing that struck me is how calm he seemed. Very, you talk about being at peace. He is comfortable in his game. He's comfortable in his approach. He's in an environment where the other coach, his coach, Brendan McCullum, is also comfortable. And actually being at that place where, you're relaxed, he's been around the game and seen the highs and lows of it and had to deal with the positives and the negatives. And he's most probably now knows and been around the block enough to expect the pressure that's going to come, knows how to deliver. So he's very comfortable in himself. And I think that also kicks on with the players. And the word that for me sort of stands out is just how he's empowered the dressing room. And that goes not just from speaking about it, but actually the stats on paper. You look at Ollie Pope's record and he's nearly doubled under Ben Stokes' regime. Joe Root's average has gone up of late. Zach Crawley, they're giving him room to fail. And so that sort of calmness and that sort of peace that he has with he's got nothing left to prove to us. He just wants to deliver what he feels is the best way to do it. And I think he's saying that to the team. Don't have to go and prove externally. Let's deliver what we do best ourselves. And so that's I've been around all sorts of captains. It's quite a hard thing to do. I think everybody sort of talks about having that calmness, and then there's a great quote from I think it's Mike Tyson, who says everything's great and you have a plan until you get punched in the face. And what happens in sport is you have all these calm plans and then it goes wrong, you lose a game, and then all the pressure unfolds and you see different parts. Well, he seems to be able to maintain a very balanced approach and a very peaceful one, and I think it really rubs off on the players.
The thing that I'm just slightly concerned
about. Here we go.
Here he goes.
Just a little bit concerned about is that they're almost, the way they're preparing and everything, all playing golf and not doing this and everything and what have you, and all enjoying themselves, which is great, and I would have loved it. But they're almost then sort of saying that then Test cricket, and they're always talking about this 5%, you know what I mean? That Test cricket is all played in the mind, which it is to a certain extent. But then you mustn't forget about the 95% that's underneath the 5.
So you're saying they're going to be all zen.
Well, yeah.
But don't forget to...
you've still kind of got to do the basics to then be able to free up your 5%.
Right. Yeah, the body still has to be able to do the physical part of, bowling a ball or hitting it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that's the only thing I'm slightly concerned about. But listen, I would have loved to have been turning up playing golf. Even if I couldn't have played golf, I would have taken it up. I would have taken it up under this regime.
The one thing, and Ebony, you're absolutely right about the calmness, because he has always had that calmness about him, and
didn't he break his hand punching a locker once?
in recent times, I'm talking about. I wasn't there in Barbados when he busted his hand, so that was back in about 2014. But look, he's had a few things that have happened in his life that have definitely changed his perspective and also have calmed him. But the one thing that people miss with Ben, he is the hardest working player in that team. His levels of fitness, personal fitness, are incredible. I've seen England players join him at the end of sessions and say, can I join in? And 10 minutes later they're laying flat on the ground thinking, I wish I hadn't joined in, because he works so hard. But also his preparation and practice is immense. He is right up there with one of the best practices I've ever seen. I've never seen a bloke with more detail, more understanding of what he needs to do to be ready for that next game. So his practice ethic and his work ethic rubs off on that team hugely. And there's a lot talked about the golf and the social, but they also, when they practice really well.
Yeah.
Which is evidently, Phil, taken into his captaincy as well. I mean, you talk about, Paul talks about the attention to detail and the hard work and the knowledge. Well, that is there in his captaincy. I mean, it's not all, stand around and sing a song and then just away you go kind of thing. I mean, he tries to affect change in the game. He doesn't let the game drift. He is adventurous with his bowling changes or his fields. I mean, he is a highly intelligent cricketing man, isn't he? I mean, and you can
Absolutely.
see that in his captaincy.
Yeah, and you can see it now about the way he goes about his life as well, as you say, as Fabi was saying there. You know, it's his work ethic, it's his training ethic. You know what you need when you don't need to do things and when you need to go away from the game, and that is a very nice place to be. So he's right on top of all that. Yeah. I mean, he knows where he is and he knows where he wants to be as well. And I mean, in those days, I can imagine this sort of team anyway, on a day off, sort of going to the gym anyway, because they sort of like doing it, you know what I mean? And they like, you know, as Farbs was saying, going with Ben to the gym and then going to play golf, you know what I mean?
Nothing different to what you did, Tuffers, in your day?
I was going to say, that sounds very much like you did.
I know.
Didn't you do that the
start of a revolution?
Christmas Day in Melbourne before you made your debut? Did
No,
you not
I
do
didn't.
that?
No, I didn't. I was sitting in the toilet downstairs knocking my knees together.
Moving swiftly on from that. But just the final thing, and this goes back to the Mike Brealey interview as well. He says what he admires in both Stokes and McCullum is how they don't show disappointment or disapproval of others in the team. He says he sometimes did. He says often the very best players haven't had that empathy with those struggling or those not so gifted. But I have a sense that these two are capable of being in touch with it. And that for a play, and you can probably see that, can't you?
Well, look,
in all the debutants that have come in and they've hit the ground running in this team.
I relate in the sense of I was one of those cricketers that in and out side. I was never a player that had a sort of could nail it down a spot. So you were always going through this range of emotions. And sometimes you talk to players who were just bossing it. They were just amazing and they did not understand the emotions that you were going through, battling away to try and find form, try and get in the team. And then that can become difficult at times, sort of just trying to relate. Whereas I sense because both Brendan McCullum and Ben Stokes have been around the block, they've seen life in different scenarios and tough scenarios, they have developed a level of empathy that allows them to relate to players. That is a real skill set actually for someone, you know, people who are gifted, who have, you know, Ben Stokes will make any team in the world. So in some ways he doesn't necessarily have to relate or fully understand what it's like. And sometimes for players, when you realise that your captain, your coach and your leader understand the emotions you're going through, they work with you and they back you, that kind of really sends a strong message. So I think this is why we're seeing a lot of the players, their stats are going up because they feel backed and they feel understood. And that is a skill. It's a real skill, especially in elite sport where sometimes it can be just so ruthless. If you've got a coach or captain who back you, it's amazing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But that, again, is another culture change. When I was in dressing rooms, Fabi, you'll probably back me up on this, you know, it was a tough old school.
You snick off, mate, and you've got no one's talking to you.
No, exactly. Well, they were talking to you. They were
But
having
in all serious toughest, and I'm genuine, I promise you, I'm not trying to take the mick here.
No.
But have you been in situations when you have then made whatever error you've made on the field, looked up at the balcony to see a head coach with head in his hands, or a captain with head in his hands?
Absolutely, storming off, or turns his back to you, or sort of like, you know, oh my God, what are you doing? What are you trying to do? You know, but then in my day, so to speak, I didn't particularly mind it in a funny sort of way. That was how you sort of learn.
It's not conducive, though, is it?
No, it wasn't necessarily conducive, but you know, you if you kept slogging it up and getting caught deep mid on off the spinner. Nowadays, and Farbs will probably be able to tell you that nowadays they probably might just sort of come over to you and suggest something.
It depends how strongly you make that suggestion. That's the only thing. But don't underestimate though. Yeah. Ben is very direct when he gives his feedback to players.
There you go.
He's also very direct and very clear. So he's very honest. He doesn't, you know, you wouldn't hear it from somebody else. If he's got something to say to you, he will tell you direct to your face, and he's very clear and he's very direct with his players, and they like that because they know where they stand, they know what they've got to do, and you know, there are one or two players where he's been very, very clear with them about what he expects. If they do it, he backs them to the hill, and if you can't, you get moved aside, and he is very clear on that.
But they must, Jeff. They have to have taught themselves not to react when things go wrong, because as we all know, it doesn't matter whether you've played this game professionally or not, you know, whether you're a parent or an amateur teammate not reacting when something goes wrong in cricket is probably the hardest of any sport that I watch, cover. I mean, the individual failure that is associated with this sport and not reacting to it, God, you have to train yourself. I'm speaking as a parent here.
Because you have no control over it either. You know, if you're the captain of the batting side sitting there on the balcony watching your players make the mistakes, well, at least they're not nearby when it happens, and you've got 30 or 40 seconds, or if it's Marnus Labuschagne, about 7 minutes before they get off the field to compose yourself. But if you're out there fielding and, you know, catches go down or whatever it is, it's in that moment. It's very hard not to
emotional
say something or express, you know, express the disappointment physically, whatever it might be. So I think keeping a rein on that, it must be a kind of meditative process. It must require so much internal calm, you know, whatever the trigger word is to the little sequence of bells or whatever it is that Ben Stokes has to hum to himself. Yeah, exactly. It's sounding a bit romantic now.
Let's move on. We're going to hear from Moeen Ali now, recalled, obviously coming out of Test retirement to play in this game. This next bit's slightly awkward because he was actually booked to be a guest on this programme until he came out of Test retirement. But I'd like all four of you to know you're all my first choices. None of you were a last-minute replacement. He's been speaking today. This is what he said.
Stokesy messaged me with a question mark, Ashes. And I didn't hear the news of Leachy at the time. And I just went LOL, thinking he's taking a mick. And then, the news came through, and then I had a chat with him. And then, the fact that it's the Ashes and it's such a big series and the exciting cricket the guys have been playing, I think this is a kind of era I would have loved while I was playing, and to be part of it would be amazing.
Do you know, or have you been told what your specific role will be? I mean, I guess Leach was there largely to perhaps just be very economical, to keep one end going, all that kind of stuff. Do you think you can do that? Is that what you're expected to do, or are you coming in to take wickets?
I've never been able to hold an end up. When I have, it's when I've been taking wickets, and that's the only time I've been able to really build any sort of pressure and stuff. But I know obviously Ben and Baz know that. And obviously you want to take wickets all the time, so doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it might be times where I need to try and build a bit of pressure and stuff and just play the game, play what's in front of me. I'm sure they know what they're going to get from me in terms of there won't be a lot of maidens all the time.
Ben Stokes is talking about making the dressing room the most inclusive place it can be, Mo. And I think when he says inclusive, he means not just questions of faith and identity and backgrounds, but kind of personalities, characters as well. Do you feel that? Do you feel this is the most kind of positive place you've been around with England? I know you're just coming back into the test team here, but is that a big sense for you?
I've felt, to be honest, I've felt like that for a while in the change room, especially in the white ball stuff. It's always been like that ever since probably 2015. Test side, you can just see from the outside that it is like that, and I know Stokesy likes characters and players that can stand up at different times, and he's more about that than the actual result, and the process is the most important thing to him. And it's great to spend time with him because actually a lot of the, I think, successful teams think like that, and the process and the characters in the team are the most important thing.
Ultimately, Mo, do you think you would have done this for any other captain?
Probably not, no.
Joe Wilson with the questions to Moeen Ali. Let me start with you, Phil Tufnell.
Yeah.
I don't know whether the line that stood out for you was, I can't really hold up an end. Or not, or whether there was something else. But
there was another one. There was another one, Chappers, when he said, well, they know what they're going to get from me, and that's not a lot of maidens.
The combined, that's like, oh, okay.
Listen, it's a gut pick, isn't it? It's a gut pick from Stokes and McCullum, and who knows? It might just come off. He's talking himself down there a little bit, and he's sort of given the license by Ben just to go out and enjoy it and express himself as we've been talking about. But It's going to be a big ask, believe me. On flat pitches, early doors, day one, you are going to need to do a job if you're only playing the three seamers, and Ben Stokes might not have too many overs in him. You know, it's not going to be turning, and you're going to have to come in and do a job for your side. And when was the last time he had a bowl with a red ball? I don't know. Was it about 2 years ago? And you can be sure that Aussie will target him. They will be going after him. They won't let him settle. They won't let him get into any kind of role.
Well, they did last time, and they did the time before that. That's been the strategy.
But the one good thing about that, in a funny sort of way, is that with his sort of IPL experience, in a funny sort of way, that might come just to his rescue a bit. That he can pull him around the crease a little bit, and if you know, so it's going to be interesting to see how that one works. It's a bit of a strange pick, isn't it? I don't know what it quite does to all the other guys, perhaps, who are playing county cricket day in, day out, and sort of just being overlooked.
It's curious in that way that, you know, if you look at things in terms of what would your opponent most like you to do, this is what Australia would have most liked. Pick Moeen Ali, absolutely. Please bring him back because he's not going to do the kind of job. Like, England have set up their bowling attack around Jack Leach playing a holding role. Sure, he might bowl 30 overs and he might not pick up a wicket, or he might only pick up one, or whatever it is, but his bowling average has never been what they want him in the side for. It's for control, and that's not what Moeen does. So if you've got someone in who does a completely different job, you know, well, your plumber's called in sick, so you've got a glazer instead. Well, it's not going to help. That's not what he's there to do.
Love that.
It's a different part of the construction process. So this.
I've had some plumbers that I think have been glazers.
Well, the problem is just glazers are buying football clubs. That's what things really
very good.
But look, he's even a couple of years ago. I remember him batting in India, and he clouded a couple of sixes over the leg side, but he didn't look like the Test batsman who, you know, and even in the limited formats when he was, you know, peeling off hundreds and everything was going through cover and point. I mean, at his peak, he was a tremendous striker of the ball. That seems to have diminished, and his bowling was always hit and miss to begin with. You saw the way Australia gobbled him up in 2017-18 when he went down there, and then smashed him out of the game in 2019 at Edgbaston. He called a temporary retirement after that Test match and said he was done with red ball cricket for a while. He's retired about twice since then. He's into Shahid Afridi areas at the moment.
You're going in there. Okay, well, look, there are some positives here. Sorry, hold on.
All that.
No, I mean,
there are four left-handers.
I have a lot of time for him. I think he's a wonderful role model, and I think he's been a fantastic cricketer at his best. I just don't.
You don't see it happening.
It's a big call. It's a big call to get someone.
It's a big call.
Retirement.
I think there's a few things though. Look, you can understand Ben Stokes' mindset. Clearly, he wants people around him who mimic or also have a similar mindset. When you're on that field in the heat of the battle, he felt he wanted to go to someone with experience. His average is not a huge amount different to Jack Leach. We're talking 34 to 36.
Sure.
So I think there are some, you know, in terms of, you know, just bringing that on the field, he will add a bit to the batting. But there are four left-handers. It could be hot. If it gets hotter, it starts turning. He could come into play. And I just see that, you know, it's not going to be ideal. Look, there's no doubt about it. But equally, there maybe wasn't that depth of spinning experience that he could go to. So he's gone to somebody who he knows how to win.
Basically,
and if you take
everyone's an attacking option, aren't they? Every other spinner they could have picked, whether it's Rayan Ahmed or whether it's Parkinson, or you've got leg spinners, you've got attacking bowlers. There really isn't a holding bowler unless you go back to Liam Dawson, which seems like
he's not. But you've got to give Moeen Ali knows how to win cricket. You know, there's times when we've been critical of Ben Stokes in white ball format and looked at some of his records, but but he's a cricketer who knows how to win. So when you get down to crunch moments, sometimes you can really rely on those players. So I think he's backed him in the sense of someone who has the same brand. He knows how to win. He's been under pressure. Clearly, even listening to that interview, he's not putting pressure on himself. No. He's not interested in soaking up stress that everybody else is feeling. He's like, I'll give you what I give you. And so I think that is actually going to aid the environment in terms of what they're trying to maintain. He will, you know, with his white ball skills, mostly against the four left-handers in the top 7, he'll mostly try and be a little bit more looking to take wickets rather than contain. So I'm looking forward to it. This could go horribly wrong, but equally it could end up being the story of the Ashes and a genius pick.
And also, if you get a call once you've retired and say, fancy having a go against the Aussies?
Tuffers, would you have done it? If you'd have got a call, would you have been in?
You'd be like a shot. Absolutely, I'll give it a go.
How do you view it, Paul?
I think it's the best choice. I mean, it's really interesting hearing that. And of course, people are going to say, you know, is he the right fit? Is it the right? His record is not fantastic. He's got absolutely nothing to lose. Going into an environment where he's loved and wanted, he will bring a lot of character to that team, a lot of experience. There's no way in the world that you could pick an inexperienced spinner who hasn't made their debut to come into this side. You can't have someone making their debut in the Ashes, that's a fact. But I think Mo has got absolutely nothing to lose, and I just think it's set up nicely for him. And I don't necessarily expect him to play Edgbaston. I wouldn't be surprised if England go with maybe Wokes as the all-rounder and three other seamers and go that way, which I think they may do at Edgbaston, maybe prove wrong, but I think that's the way they would go. But I think Mo's got nothing to lose, great environment, and his record as a spin bowler is actually pretty decent. If you look at his stats, they're not bad, to be honest. So despite Jeff absolutely, destroying him there, and I'm not surprised, it's always the same. When you play Australia, it's the whole of the Australian public that you have to play. From the immigration officer you first meet at Perth. Absolutely. So I'm not surprised that their journos are getting stuck in before it started.
Although, Paul, you very subtly managed to put Tuffers away as well in that answer by saying you can't make your debut in the Ashes, which I thought was a brilliant way of putting him away. Just a final one before we let you go.
Put me away. I did make my Ashes debut.
I know, and he said you shouldn't make your debut in the Ashes, so he just kind of put you away.
No. Apologies, Tuffers. Sorry, mate. Sorry, mate.
There's no need to be apologies. I'm still mentally scarred. I agree with you. I'm still scarred deeply.
Just a final one before we let you go, Paul. You've obviously had Steve Smith at Sussex earlier in the summer.
Player.
How was he? How did he benefit from that? What were his overall thoughts ahead of this summer?
Look, he was excellent for us. He did what we wanted him to do, which was to, we've got a group of young players and we wanted as much experience in there. World-class player. He was absolutely outstanding. He was brilliant with the group. And let's be honest. I mean, I said at the time we weren't trying to give Australia, a massive advantage. The bloke averaged 100 in the last series here. He averages 60 in England. So it's not as if we were, helping him to get used to conditions he doesn't know. But look, he was brilliant. He was brilliant for county cricket. County cricket got more coverage in those 3 weeks. We had good crowds here at Hove, Leicester and Worcester where he played. He was fantastic for English cricket. He really was. He was great for our players. It was an interesting contest when we had Pujara obviously was with us. So they were leading up to the World Test Championship. Ollie Robinson played as well leading up to the Ashes. Marnus was here for the Glamorgan game. It was brilliant. It was brilliant for county cricket, and it was something that
like the old days.
I would do again.
Like
absolutely.
The old days, Paul.
Absolutely, and it was the right thing to do. But look, Steve was fantastic. He is fantastic, and no surprise he got 100 in the World Test Championship final, and he will have a brilliant Ashes, whether he played for us this year or not, to be honest.
Fabs, just a quick one. Any tips about getting him out? Because we didn't do a very good job last time.
Well, we had a young net bowler who beamed him and hit him on the thumb. That was his first welcome. And then, unfortunately, a photographer came into the net in one of our practices, asked him to sit on a bench, and he got whacked in the back of the neck from one of our batters. So we tried our best to take him out of the Ashes, but unfortunately we didn't quite succeed. Getting him out, I'm not sure. Knocking him out, we tried.
Benny, John Lewis has said it in the build-up to this. We're very keen to disrupt the flow of Australia's game by playing the game the way we want to play it, which is how in a test.
Yeah, well, I was talking to the girls. I was over in South Africa recently for the World T20, and Baz Ball obviously is stuck in the men's game, and the girls trying to get Louis Ball to stick. It's not quite happening, but what we are seeing, it's not quite sticking. I even pulled it up to him. Louis Ball, he's like, no, it's not sticking. But there is a shift in how the girls are playing. You see young players like Alice Capsey, who's come through of late, who may go on to make her Test debut. I wouldn't be surprised. Nat Siver has gone into another gear, in another stratosphere. They are upping their intensity and their brand of cricket, similar to the men, and I think they have been bolstered by seeing them. The truth is, though, and if we come back to the facts, Australia are currently World T20 champions, 50 over champions, Ashes holders and Commonwealth gold holders. So as much as they are improving, there has been a bit of a gulf between 1 and 2. They are 1 and 2 in the world, but that gulf has been noticeable. Meg Lanning is not joining the tour due to some challenges for herself, and that may provide a window of opportunity because she's the best captain, I believe, in the world without doubt, and she's ruthless. So there's a little hope that England are now bringing a new brand of cricket, a bit like the guys are. Meg Lanning, the best captain in the world, is not there, and they are at home with the opportunity to really do something special. So I'm looking forward to it.
Do you think that one final one on this? But we talk culture and so on as we have done, and fear, eradicating the fear of failure and mistakes are fine. Do you think that's harder? I know it's a multi-format series, but do you think that's harder when it's just a one-off test?
Yeah, and also because whereas in T20 50 over the players are well drilled, the girls have been through it, they know how to play in this format, and they've got it tested to a T. When it comes to red ball, they're not playing a huge amount. And for many players, Alice Capsey, for example, who's played loads of white ball, that fear will creep in because it is a little bit different. You haven't had as much experience. That new ball, if there's any sort of cloud cover and the ball starts swinging around the corner, it will start to creep in. So it's going to take a lot from the team to maintain the mindset that they need to. But I do think it's a really good culture at the moment. Jonathan Lewis is doing a great job at getting a really exciting team together, but it will be a challenge.
That's always been the issue with women's tests. I mean, over the last 10 years particularly, is when they've been one-offs in these multi-format series, players get so few opportunities to play a test match. I mean, England's last test was a year ago against South Africa. When you've only got that one shot, everybody tends to play conservatively. Captains captain conservatively. Batters go about their innings conservatively. And we've had rain in just about every women's test over the last 10 years since the one in Perth in 2014. So they've got 5 days at least this time around. So if there is some rain, hopefully we'll still be able to get a result out of it. But I think it needs that willingness to take it on, like we saw in Canberra with the last Women's Ashes test when Lanning gave them a generous declaration and England went for the runs on the last day. That felt like a turning point, hopefully, and hopefully that proves to be the case in terms of attacking the game more.
Jeff, it's kind of you on your own so far, so it's like bring a friend to work day for you, so you don't feel too outnumbered.
Well, look, I mean, in this kind of circumstance, this is the odd thing because I'm not parochial. I don't care who wins. I like watching cricket. I'll watch anyone play cricket. But I come to England in an Ashes series and everyone expects me to play the part of the parochial Australian. And you find yourself...
you did it very well in the Mo and Ali discussion, well done on that.
That was a purely cricket conversation. And if Mo smokes 40 off 20 balls to win a close test match in the first one, I will happily write that copy for the paper and I will enjoy it very much.
So you need to play that part for us. Who've you been talking to, or who've you brought along? If
you want to talk parochial and you want to get a little bit of Australian grit and determination on your side, you can't go past GD McGrath, the fella who did it better than just about anybody over the years, the 5-0 man himself.
Let's hear from him then. Here's Glenn McGrath a little earlier chatting with Jeff.
I know every Ashes series is anticipated and maybe we think that it's different every single time leading up to it, but this one does feel a bit different, the way that England have been playing over the last year, the fact that Australia have just been crowned world champions and then those two teams getting ready to go head-to-head. It feels like a particularly exciting one.
Well, it does, and there's been a lot sort of spoken beforehand, and I spent a few weeks in the UK promoting it as well, and there was quite a buzz around with... Australia's playing some pretty good cricket. They, like you just mentioned, they've just beaten India in the World Test Championship, and England have been playing some very positive, very aggressive cricket, and known as Bazball. And I think everyone, especially the Australians, are looking forward to seeing how that goes. And it's been built up. England, if they can keep the form they've been playing and keep playing that positive, aggressive attitude and doing well, it could be a very good series.
The Bazball stuff, the hype around it, the approach, I know that when you were bowling, you didn't mind having batters coming after you because that gave you more opportunities. How would you have approached it from a bowling sense? If you have, it's different having maybe one player who's aggressive if you were bowling to Kevin Peterson or Brian Lara or someone like that, but a whole team that's set up to keep going at you, how would you adapt tactically?
Firstly, you've got to adapt to the conditions and be strong in your bowling plans and have a plan A, plan B, and not start sort of chasing wickets or chasing what the batsman's doing. So you've got to make them play good shots off very good deliveries, ball after ball. And that's what it's about. And I think if you can do that, you're going to create plenty of chances. Sure, you might go for a few runs, but if the batsmen go after you, then you change, you start bowling Yorkers or trying to go full at the stumps and just play right into the batsman's hands. Things can turn ugly. I think back to that Headingley match 4 years ago when Ben Stokes played that incredible innings and won a game that Australia should have won. I think it probably stemmed out there a little bit, and I think that took Australia by surprise a little bit. They still created probably 3 chances, but yeah, you've just got to be strong in your bowling plans. Okay, I'm going to bowl good balls, and if they're prepared to take me on, they have to play a shot off a good ball after ball after ball.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? That Headingley test feels like the precursor to the Bazball philosophy, I suppose. But like you say, part of the reason it worked is that the Australians were shell-shocked. They weren't really expecting that to happen. If you're going into a series knowing ahead of time that that's exactly how the other team is going to play, then you can set yourself up to succeed against it or to be more likely to do so.
Exactly right there, Jeff. And you think back to that Headingley match, England were in a position where they just, they had nothing to lose. So Ben Stokes backed himself, played an incredible innings and won the game. All of a sudden you're going to a test series, a test match, everything's on the line. It's a little bit different mindset, but they have been playing with some good confidence. They've chased down 300 plus in the 4th innings 3 times and did it comfortably, which shows that it can be done. But I think those bowling attacks probably weren't quite as strong as what the Australian bowling attack is, and that's going to be the difference.
Interested in your thoughts on Scott Boland. Obviously, he's a fan favourite, only played 8 test matches. It's one of those stories of, an overnight success 10 years in the making. He'd plugged away at domestic level. He'd played a little bit of white ball cricket for Australia. People knew about him within Australian cricket. They knew who he was, but I'd say that he was respected rather than feared. And then, so how is it that he's been able to come up to the top level and he's just had this knack of taking wickets in bursts, taking 2 or 3 in no time at all, and being a destroyer in a way that wasn't his go at domestic level?
Yeah, I think some bowlers actually perform better the higher level they play. The pitches that he played on early, fair enough, they had a little bit in it, but you still have to bowl well. And the thing that Scotty Boland does well is he just runs in ball after ball after ball, challenging the batsman. There's no easy runs. There's no easy shots. You're always there or thereabouts. He bowls great lengths, just does a little bit off the pitch, but does enough just get the edge. So he's always at you. There's no, like I said, there's no easy runs. You've got to be on your game. And the thing is, when you pick up wickets in clumps, it's because the new batsman comes out and he's under the pump straight away. There's no easy deliveries. And, I look at his style of bowling and I think it's probably better suited to English conditions than Australians nearly. So I think he's going to have a big impact on this series. It's going to be interesting to see which way the selectors go. But the match at the Oval the other day against India showed what he can do. And he was probably one of the toughest bowlers to face in those conditions. So, I think he's just one of those bowlers that's at you all the time and you've got to be prepared to play every single ball, which makes it tough for them.
Pat Cummins captaining the side. It's quite funny in a way. For 150 years in Australian cricket, it was just assumed wisdom that fast bowlers couldn't captain a test side. Ray Lindwall did it once and that was it. And then Pat Cummins has come along and done a tremendous job. Does it make you a bit wistful? Do you look back and think, maybe I could have done that job, or were you relieved to have dodged it?
No, I never had any aspirations of captaining Australia. I was always happy to try do my best to make the captains look good. But, I think everyone knows in the cricketing circles that fast bowlers are the most intelligent in the game. So I'm not surprised that Pat Cummins has done well. And I didn't mind a batsman being a captain because when he's out there batting, he can focus 100% on his batting. When a bowler's bowling, if he's also the captain, he's also got to think about where the game's going, who's bowling next, this and that. And as a bowler, you've got to focus 100% on your bowling when you're out there to achieve your best. And that's always been the issue where, fast bowlers or bowlers in general probably shouldn't be captains because they need to focus the whole time. Whereas what I think Australia's done well, when Pat Cummins is bowling, he passes or hands over the captaincy to Steve Smith so he can focus 100% on his bowling. And I think that's been what's made it very successful. There's no egos there, which is great, and that's why he's done a great job. So, no, I haven't been surprised that he's done well. And, yeah, the senior players have had a big impact in that. But, yeah, it's good to see.
Now, wherever you go around England, Glenn McGrath, you have a party trick. People like to get you to say Ashes 5-0. But you've got a chance to put a different spin on it this year because Australia just won the World Test Championship final. You could actually say 6-0 for the first time.
Well, it's probably not the first time because I think I've said 10-0 in the past as well when Australia won 5-0 in the previous one. But, you know me, I'm not one to really make predictions. But, I'm happy to go out on a limb a little bit here. And, I've been talking up this series for a little bit and I've been saying that I'm really looking forward to it. There's no doubt about that. The way England are playing at the moment, aggressive form of the game, which I really enjoy. And I hope other teams look at the way England play and take a leaf out of their book moving forward for Test cricket because we need to keep it fresh and keen and people coming to watch the game. So I think England are playing some great cricket. Australia, quality team without a doubt. They've got some great senior players. The batsmen have been doing well lately. Travis Head, Marnus Labuschagne, Steve Smith, great bowling attack. So I think every game is going to be right down to the wire with Australia just winning each game. So I'm still going 5-0, but it's going to be a great series.
We got there in the end. I mean, you can't claim 6-0 with the World Test Championship, Jeff. Come on.
Yes, you
Come
can.
on.
Hey, 6 Test matches, 6 wins. That's what it reads.
How impressed have you been by Pat Cummins' captaincy or actually his man management as well?
Hugely impressed. I mean, he came into the job at a difficult time. He wasn't expecting to have it. Suddenly he's got about 2 weeks' notice. Oh, by the way, you're the captain for the Ashes. Good luck. Your predecessor's just resigned in disgrace. Your coach is probably outgoing, but we haven't told him yet. And so he's got this delusion that he's going to hang on for another 20 years. Just go and win the Ashes as well, could you, while you're at it? Great, no worries. And, I mean, he's kept things together and then he was absolutely in the gun from the sort of lunatic part of Australian media after Justin Langer didn't get his contract extension for as long as he wanted it because, Justin Langer has a lot of friends on that right-wing side of the media who were very happy to blame Pat Cummins. Now, he'd just come into the job a few weeks beforehand. It's not like he came into the job and said, sack the coach. It was already decided that was what was going to happen. Just about everybody knew, except for Justin Langer, who apparently couldn't read the writing on the wall, that he wasn't going to get an extension. And that came down to conversations that had been happening months before this point. So, then Pat Cummins goes through that experience of being lined up by some of the crazy fringe. And then he has personal family tragedy in the last few months as well. And he's had to try to come through the other side of that and arrive in England and take on this huge task, as well as continue the sort of reputation rebuilding work that the Australian team was doing before his appointment as well. So he's had a mighty job to do, and his bowling hasn't suffered in the slightest. He's continued to perform brilliantly on the field, and he's got a team working really well under his leadership. So I think he's been hugely impressive.
And he's obviously part of this pace attack, Phil, of, Cummins, Stark, Hazelwood. And yet, and Jeff spoke to Glenn about it there, do you think we should be most worried, we, England, should be most worried about Scott Boland?
Absolutely. I was so impressed. And I've been impressed with him as well. And if you're even talking in the same breath as a Hazelwood as well, that, he's top notch as well. So to be here, to be even in that sort of company, is pretty amazing. He is very good. I think he could be the total key if Australia are going to go on and win this Ashes series. I think him and the likes of, in tandem with someone like a Nathan Lyon. And then you've still got Cummins and Stark. Come on. That is a proper serious pace attack. Metronomic, hits that pace. He's quick enough. He looks like he can bowl 9 or 10 over spells. He comes in, you've got a good bouncer. He'll be absolutely loving bowling with the Duke ball. I think he's going to have a big summer.
I'm nervous as well with Scott Boland. Yeah, look, see, one, we talk about his background and how he's come up with, looking at how he went about that World Test Championship, picked up 5 wickets, some of those key ones on the final day where I didn't think India were going to ever win, but there was that question, could they dig in, could they do something special? Kohli's still at the crease, there was all this hope, and he comes in and he gets him snuck across, he gets Jadeja with a beauty, and he is relentless with line and length. He just seems to give the captain what they need, is just coming at you consistently. I think the conditions will play into his favour, and for me he pips Hazelwood in the side because of the fitness, and Hazelwood, great bowler that Hazelwood is, he hasn't been in form, he hasn't due to fitness hasn't played a huge amount of first class cricket, so for me it's quite clear he should be opening up, and alongside that attack, if it's Stark, Boland, Pat Cummins, etc., Nathan Lyon, I mean, that is a pretty tasty attack.
Yeah, with Scott Boland, it's like training at altitude for your running races. He bowled on the deadest track in the world, just about, at the MCG. Maybe the Sinhalese Sports Club and St John's in Antigua might be up there in the conversation. It was dreadful for about a decade. You remember the Ashes Test in 2017-18, Alistair Cook making the 244 on the pretty much the worst track I've ever seen a Test match on. It just was lifeless. They've relaid the square there since, but basically Scott Boland's first-class career was figuring out how to take wickets on that, and he got a wicket every 50-odd deliveries on that surface. Then you put him in Test cricket in the last 3 or 4 years where the pitches have juiced up, like they've had some life in them, and suddenly it's like it's made it easier for him to play Test cricket than it was to play first-class cricket beforehand. You look at the extravagant movement that he's able to get off the seam. He doesn't swing the ball, but he hits the seam. The one to K.S. Bharat, the Indian keeper, that bowled him middle stump after pitching about a foot outside off, cut him in half. That's the kind of thing that Boland's been able to do. And maybe his consistency means that England can Bazball him at some stage.
Absolutely.
Try to take him off the top of the length because he'll bowl in the same spot. They can give it a go. It might work. But if they have one Test match where they take him apart, they'll probably have 1 or 2 where they don't.
Absolutely. And we were just listening to Glenn.
Would he have started?
We were just carry on.
No, go on, Tuffers.
No, and we were just listening to Glenn McGrath saying, which I found, how do you sort of combat Bazball? And he said, just bowl your best ball as many times as you possibly can, and he is the kind of fella who will just look to go and do that. And if England do run at him and want to take him on, it could be their undoing.
Would he have started his Test career earlier if he'd played in a different state then, Jeff?
That's what we were just saying.
Well, I think across the board there have been a lot of very flat Australian pitches over the last decade or so. You've got a lot of the grounds have drop-in pitches. They're Australian rules football grounds more than cricket grounds these days, even though they started out as cricket grounds. So you have to do a fair bit of drudge work. There are a lot of big scores in Sheffield Shield cricket, and that has been the way over the last 10, 15 years. So I'm not sure that it's necessarily a state-based thing. Basically, he was looked at as he was an unsexy, unglamorous option, run in, hit a length, do a job. They liked him in that one-day and T20 team for a year or so because he was really good at hitting Yorkers as well. So he pretty much just bowled the one delivery in that format. And in first-class cricket, he bowls the one delivery, which is hitting that hard length just outside off stump. And then occasionally slips in the bouncer. He's got a very nasty bouncer because he's so accurate. He's at that kind of collarbone length, which is really uncomfortable to play. So I think he just wasn't appreciated for what he was able to do by earlier regimes, and it took a shake-up at selection and coaching for him to be able to put his hand up for a spot.
On with the question marks over Ben Stokes' fitness, Ebony, does Cameron Green make Australia better balanced than England?
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, isn't it? Because he is an outstanding all-rounder. When you look down that Australian line and you're putting in your bowlers, obviously Pat Cummins straight and goes, Nathan Lyon, your spinner, but Cameron Green is dead set and he will cause problems, I think, and it gives you more options. When you've got that all-rounder who can deliver in the middle, it gives a captain more options to go with and play the strategy and tactics. Whereas for Ben Stokes at the moment, we're already not sure. He's talked about he'll put his body on the line. He's bowled a little bit in warm-ups recently, but he didn't bowl against Ireland. I think he bowled an over during the IPL. So we know that this injury is real and is a real threat. If they then go in, for example, with Moeen Ali and it doesn't pay off, and Jeff, what you were talking up earlier, comes off, it might happen, then we are looking at potentially scenarios with 3 bowlers on the pitch from an England perspective versus Australia, who could have 5 firing bowlers and an all-rounder in Cameron Green. So it does leave it is one of our vulnerabilities that we have to be honest about. We were talking about it before. Also our bowlers, there are a couple of injuries that have knocked around. Jimmy Anderson's had a bit of a groin. Ollie Robinson's had a bit of an ankle injury. So the health of the Australian bowlers, to me, looks a bit better going in.
Absolutely.
And that all-rounder just really shores everything up.
And it's a marathon, not a sprint. There's a bit of time off between 1 and 2 test matches, but then they're back-to-back almost, and that is hard work. In the dirt, 5 days, they're going to be pretty flat. The weather's set fair. I think it's going to be almost a test of the bodies. How many's left?
Yeah.
How many's left?
We were actually talking a moment ago, weren't we, about, Jimmy Anderson, he's been going forever, but there was it 2019 where he had that calf injury, pulled up after the first test and was off, and we didn't see him again.
After the first 4 overs on morning 1.
Yeah, so there is that vulnerability with, there are a couple of injuries already in place, and we think sometimes that these bowlers, you can put your body, but with everything going on, it's important that we have a strong stock, and so there are a couple of niggles. Stokes, Jimmy Anderson didn't bowl in Ireland. Well, whether he would have or not is a different question, but he's got that vulnerability, and so is Ollie Robinson. So we do need our bowlers to just fire fit and be strong.
What do they do? How do they put that bowling outfit together? Because you've got, as far as it seems to me, Stuart Broad has to play because you need him coming around the wicket to David Warner on the first morning if possible. That's the trump card that you've got to play. Mark Wood's got to play because he's the only pace option left, and if you want to get him in, say, 3 tests across the series, given that you've got to manage him, he has to play 1-3-5 if you can spin it that way. And then Anderson, if he's fit, you've got to pick him when he's fit, but then Robinson is such a key part of that as well. Where do you go? How do you get 4 into 3 for that?
Well, I'd be going Ollie Robinson in for me. We heard Fabi earlier saying he had Chris Wokes in his top 4, which I thought that was interesting. As his spinner, as his all-rounder role. It's a good question. I think that there's going to be no doubt that there's going to be potentially a bit of a rotation with Jimmy Anderson, Stuart Broad, but Stuart Broad has to open that battle with him and David Warner. I'm excited about. It's been hyped up. Whether it'll go, look, him coming around the wicket is going to be quite exciting. He makes it.
Yep.
Mark
and Warner had that little dig at him in his press conference the other week when they said, "Oh, you're worried about facing Stuart Broad?" And he said, "Well, it depends if they pick him in the first test." He knows that Stuart Broad doesn't like being left out. He just couldn't resist having a little dig there.
It was also interesting.
So you've got Broad and Broad and Robinson. You've got Broad and Robinson there, but now I'm not letting you off here.
Sorry.
I'm intrigued where you're going here.
Well, I want Jimmy in.
So Broad, Robinson, Anderson.
So Mark Wood's your spinner.
Yeah. Where's Mark Wood then?
Mark Wood is okay. He's not playing every test because of balancing him. Does he play in Edgbaston?
I think you don't. Well, for a start off, I think you look at conditions when you turn up there for a start off. Look overcast, look at the pitch. I think
Lords is flatter typically.
Yeah. So I think that will come into their thinking. I just feel that Broad, Anderson, Robinson for me it might look a little bit samey, but then for me, they are your 3 best bowlers.
And we assume Stokes gives us...
and Moeen.
And Stokes gives us a few overs as well.
Yeah. So you play your 3 best bowlers. We made that, let's play him there.
Are you worried about the pace? Are you worried about
the pace? A little bit. If it's hot and dry and flat and they're all a bit samey and it's not doing too much, that's fine. But you pick your best bowlers for the first test match. Let's not worry about what's coming on like that. And then if things don't go well, then you can bring in the kind of, bring in the pace guy, which that's the artillery, and that sort of something.
Ebony looks like she's changing her mind
here. The only thing I do think pace is important. I wouldn't expect Wood to play every test, 1-3-5, or balance him out depending on the body. I just worry that if Stokes has maybe not got many overs in him, then our attack potentially, if the conditions don't go, becomes a bit savvy. I just would be considering a out and out pace option as a point of difference. How you get him in though is going to be a tough call. So I'm going to just ponder that before Friday even.
Okay, but use the tough as an excuse that you need to see what the conditions are like. I'm just surprised that Toughest for once has actually given me an 11. Normally, if I'd asked you for 4 bowlers, you'd have tried to squeeze a 5th one in. Let's just go back to Australia. We've talked about Steve Smith. Let's hear from him on how he approaches the contest between bat and ball.
I think for me it's trying to put pressure back onto them as much as possible, and if they're bowling a really good spell, absorbing that pressure. So just playing with my gears, going up and down in gears to be able to have success out in the middle, and I think that's part of Ashes cricket. You go through difficult periods and you have to absorb it, and then when it's on your terms, you got to make the most of it. I think the ideal headspace is you're actually not thinking about anything. You're just focusing on that red thing coming down at you. And in between balls, it's just about switching off as much as possible, keeping your mindset in a positive space, and then when the bowler's running in, you start to focus that little bit more, but hopefully your thoughts are, there's not too many of them. It's nice and quiet, and all you're doing is concentrating on the bowler coming in at you, and then when he releases the ball, just the red thing coming down at you, and trying to watch that as closely as possible every time.
Sounds like he's learned from your batting psyche, Phil.
Well, I mean, it's a simple game, isn't it? Just watch
the ball.
It's a simple game, isn't it? Just watch the ball. You're talking about practicing. Jeff, you probably help me out on this a little bit. Mm-hmm. Him and Labuschagne are two of the best at it, and they just don't stop.
No, they're net freaks, and they like to get in the net alongside each other, and then they sort of give each other tips, and they watch each other batting, and they ask bystanders, like, "Where's my back foot? Is my back foot moving across?" I mean, Bharat Sundaresan, our colleague, has just ended up pretty much being a member of the coaching staff because he's always there watching the net sessions, and so they give him their different requirements for that day. Can you tell me if my back foot's moved across this line? Tell me what my wrist position's doing. So,
and he doesn't sleep, does he? He says that he doesn't sleep much. He just lies in bed thinking about how to, play the extra cover drive or who.
There was a point where I remember we asked him about 5 years ago, do you read the coverage about you? And he just sort of fixed us with a look and said, I read everything. I read everything. I mean, he's a very intense kind of dude. Yeah. And that 2017 Adelaide test, particularly when Joe Root and Chris Wokes were not out overnight on the 4th evening, they had a run chase the next day. He said, I just couldn't sleep. I was just worried about them winning. I was like, mate, they need another 200 in their 5 down. You're probably okay. But no bedtime for Steve.
No. Whereas Labuschagne just sleeps whilst waiting to come in, which was a brilliant shot. How good was that? It was fantastic last week. By the way, that Steve Smith interview, part of the How to Win the Ashes documentary on iPlayer. The accompanying podcast series is on BBC Sounds. What about Andrew McDonald? Because Jeff, we haven't spoken about him at all.
Nope.
Going, we've done this whole thing on McCullum and Stokes. We've touched on Pat Cummins. We've even talked about Justin Langer. So, what's Andrew McDonald like?
Yeah, I mean, he doesn't have a ball named after him, does he? There's no coaching style that's Ron Ball didn't really catch on. So he's I think that sums him up, is that he's very much a stay in the background kind of character, and that's what that Australian team wanted. I mean, when Justin Langer is an extremely intense individual, and people use that, and maybe they use it euphemistically in some ways, but after a few years of being in the dressing room with that, most people in there had enough, and that's fair enough. You need a change of environment once in a while. Andrew McDonald's the complete opposite. He's sit in the background, he's stay calm, you very rarely hear quotes from him because he's very careful. He puts everything in management speak and makes sure that there's nothing incendiary that can pop into a headline. But he's basically about saying, well, these players are experienced, they know what they're doing, they don't need me to micromanage them, they just need me to help them with whatever they actually want help with. Yeah. And I can help them best a lot of the time by staying out of the way, doing planning and administration in the background. Yeah. to just do whatever needs doing, but don't try to interfere. And I mean, it seems to be working.
Yeah, Mac Ball sounds nice.
Mac Ball, that could work.
Mac Ball does that. And interestingly, Ebony, they've brought Andy Flower in as well.
Oh. Well, that's not good, is it?
Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that. I should have known that. I didn't know that.
No,
well, that's
sorry.
Not good. That's a bit of insight.
as a consultant.
Yeah,
Jeff, is that
that's
it?
not good.
Not in any sort of hugely deep way. I think he was just floating about training for a couple of days, and they were picking his brain for a bit of information. But I guess that's your prerogative, right? Once you've got the state secrets from one side, he can tell them all about Matt Pryor and Alistair Cook.
Well, the only good thing I think with modern day cricket is with franchise cricket, the honest truth is these players are playing in many dressing rooms, and they get to know the inner workings of every player, how they prepare, their weaknesses. So yes, it's going to be a bit of a frustration from a perspective of having that insight, but I have a feeling the Australians will already know what they need to know, and maybe they bounce off him, but they will know. But I didn't know that. I missed that, and that's an interesting bit of insight there.
Yeah, is it? Are we making it more of a story than it really is, Jeff, by the sound of it? You made it sound like he was just passing by and they thought, we'll have a chat.
Not quite that much. But look, it's not like he's deep in the war room planning out all of the strategy. I suppose you use all of the resources at your disposal. 2019 Australia had Steve Waugh in the dressing room knocking about. You grab Ricky Ponting was doing some stuff with them. Whatever.
He's a canny operator, isn't he?
Yeah.
Let's be fair. Andy Flower, he knows his stuff.
Well, I mean, Andy Flower is one of the most impressive individuals in decades of Test cricket, really, what he was able to do with Zimbabwe when they were the most struggling team, trying to get that team started, and then the way that he left that team with a stand-on principle against a dictatorial government. There are very few ways that you can try to say that Andy Flower is not an admirable character.
Yep.
And I suppose, Phil, what Paul Farbrae said earlier as well when he was talking about David Saker. I mean, there's a fairly long line of people who'll flip back and forth, isn't there?
Well, absolutely. I mean, those days are gone, haven't they? It's as simple as that. I suppose with England, it was the likes of Duncan Fletcher coming in, really, which kind of turned it all around. So listen, you pick the brains of the guys that you want to talk to now. As you say, if there's someone walking past and you want to grab them in, I think everyone's very up for just coming in and having a chat. It's as simple as that nowadays.
Well, brilliant. I do love how we've turned our appointment into they bumped into each other. Do you want a coffee? Well, how do England operate? Thanks very much, Andy.
They hopped in the lift at the same time on the way down to breakfast.
Yes, exactly. We thought we'd end the last 10-15 minutes by talking about Ashes heroes and villains, because every series, either home or away, throws up names who either make themselves heroes through something rather bizarre, or there is a standard pantomime villain that we see series after series. Can we start with yours, Phil?
Yeah.
Because I wasn't expecting this.
No, okay.
But because I sort of remember him from the mid-80s playing, but never massively standing out to me as a kid watching as a villain. Well, so I'm interested.
Yeah, no, Greg Matthews we're talking about here. And he was, I wouldn't necessarily say villain necessarily. I would say more character. Character of the game. I played against Greg. He was my first Test wicket, actually.
Right. That's why he's in your list. That's why he's in your list.
It's just come into my mind.
Oh, really? I bet it has.
which was a full toss, and he's come down the wicket and chipped it to Eddie Hemmings at deep long on.
Wow.
Yeah, wow. So that was nice. But he was a character, and he was a sort of a character that I sort of warmed to in a funny sort of way. He would always be messing about a little bit on the boundary and what have you. And he loved to chirp, and he gave me a lot of chirp as well. So, a little bit off the wall. Can I just give you one of my heroes, though? And one of the main reasons why I played cricket was Dennis Lillee. Dennis Lillee, when I was growing up, was my idol. The shirt open, not shy of a chat, you know what I mean? The handlebar moustache, used to run in there, good-looking fella. And I used to... I had the pleasure of meeting him on more than one occasion, and he didn't disappoint. He was a top man. So, DK Lillee, and the wipe of the sweat from the eyebrows, and him and Tomo were really sort of ignited my cricketing love and passion watching those two.
Just chipping in there, I played a charity match against Matthews.
Yes.
He had a lot to say. He had a lot to say. I was just trying to pat it back, like just charity match, and he had a lot to say.
Yeah, he's got more and more to say as the years have gone on. He's somehow found more words.
He was a character.
Yeah, he's always been that way. I mean, people remember him bowling in the woolen vest in Chennai. In 86, was it, when it was about 42 degrees, and he said, hot, this isn't hot, I'll show them. Goes out and bowls in the jumper just to prove he could do it.
Yeah, he was a character.
Yeah.
Interesting.
But was he, Jeff, always, I mean, has he become more of a character through time and anecdotes and so on, or right back at the start of his career was he character?
No, I think he was right back at the start. I think Greg Matthews has been a loose rig, is how we might describe it, in Australia from day one. It was borne out in his career. It was always this not quite sure what he was. Sometimes batted six, made a couple of test hundreds, bowled okay, took 61 wickets, wasn't sort of really a frontline spinner, but often did a job. You're never really sure what Greg Matthews is doing. I can tell you statistically he's the most consistent batsman in the history of Test cricket in terms of the scores grouping closest to the mean, basically. His average is about 41, and he's got the closest grouping of his career scores in terms of proximity to his average of anyone who's ever played the game.
Wow.
That was a good pick. That was a left field pick.
What does
that
mean?
was a left field pick.
What does mean?
It's the centre of what you're most likely to score. Most of his scores are closer to his average than anybody else's. There you go. There's some maths chat for you.
Standard deviation.
If this little bit of the chat sends people towards his Wikipedia entry, then it's worth it on its own. I mean, it is a remarkable Wikipedia entry, which does include a quote from Christopher Martin Jenkins just in front of me, describing Greg Matthews as a tough, useful, determined little cricketer, a staunch, correct left-hand bat, and a brilliant fielder, and then a brilliant final line. He's also a cocky, slightly zany character. And lots more very interesting stats about Greg Matthews if you go onto his Wikipedia page. I thought interestingly there, Ebony, as well, tough as picking heroes who were Australian. And that brings us right back to the start of, yes, there can be rivalry. Yes, you can have your pantomime villains. But actually, if you love your cricket, you're going to be inspired by men or women now, with the women's Ashes on either side.
Yeah, and look, I was picking mine when I heard this, and I struggled to put in the category of hero or villain because mine is Steve Waugh. I was just saying to Jeff, I remember when I was getting in the England team and I was looking at all the batters who were kind of digging in, and I read his book. I mean, it was a big book. It's like a Bible. It's a massive book. I had to go from the book to audio book because I just couldn't quite finish it. I had to listen to it. It was War and Peace.
Going to throw you back carrying it around.
But again, he was just one of those resilient kind of cricketers, wasn't he? Against England as well. Would you call him a villain? He scored over 3,000 runs, averaging nearly 60. And he's just that sort of character for me that just kept coming at England. He just was confident in his own skin. He just seemed to have this presence, and I was just obsessed with him as a player. So I don't know whether I call him a hero. Go on, Tuffers.
No. I'm going to say it's funny you say that. Had the great ability of, during warm-ups, of walking past you and looking down his nose at you and making you feel about 6 inches tall as you're sort of having a few slip catches or knocking up like that. He'd sort of walk past you and sort of go...
But did he have a to me, because I only got to watch him as you're growing up, but did he have that because he looked like he just had this sort of rock-like steel.
Yeah, but then could also then just sort of, as you say, with a look,
take you down,
make you feel 3 inches tall.
Yeah, what a cricketer. So for me, I guess, in some ways he's a hero for me personally. Maybe for England he's a villain. He's, he was a difficult cricketer to play against, but one that I have huge admiration for.
And just played a million Ashes series. He was just always there. It seemed for so long he was just there and he was batting.
Yeah, that's right. And he had the cheek to call Michael Atherton a cockroach. I mean...
They were such a tough, hard team. We talk about going back to what we talked about, Jeff, about how environments have changed and cultures have changed and behaviours have changed. But my God, I mean, they were granite-like, that team, weren't they?
Yeah, I mean, they're I suppose when we look at team cultures and things like that, I'm a lot happier with the one that exists now than the ones of 20 years ago. They were a hard team to like, I found. You know, even as an Australian, I didn't warm to that cricket team very much. You couldn't help but admire the skill, but the way they went about it seemed so unnecessary. If you're as good as that, do you really need to be standing at gully gobbing off for the whole time that you're not batting when you've just, smoked a double hundred yourself? Like maybe it's time to give it a rest. So yeah, I found myself having sympathies with the teams that Australia was playing against.
Do you think that's devalued them in some ways in the eyes of? I was doing something for The Athletic this week, and they'd done this big article on the back of Manchester City winning the treble of just what makes a great sport team, and it had everything from the West Indies of 1984 to that Aussie team under Steve Waugh, but also to St Helens Rugby League of 2006 or the Chicago Bulls or the Chicago Bears in 85. I mean, every sport you could think of. The Jamaican track team with Usain Bolt. Do you think likability is important to be a great team?
Well, I think it varies massively depending on the perspective of who you're talking to. There'd be some people who'd be listening to this telling me that I'm an idiot and I'm too soft and all the rest of it, and that you're supposed to be tough, and that's how sport at the top is supposed to be. For me, someone who respects their opponent is someone who respects the sport that they're undertaking, and that means that there's something bigger, something more important than just the match that you're playing, the contest that you're in, because it's bigger than you are and it's bigger than the game that you're in. It doesn't matter ultimately the result in your individual contest. What matters is that you're part of the game more broadly, and so that's what I think matters. I think character matters. I think players being representative of their countries needs to mean that those players deserve to represent their countries. It means that there should be character bars for players getting selected. It shouldn't just be about how good you are. It's whether you've got something as a person to contribute.
Tuffers?
Yeah, nice, like that.
Did you like a bit of, only thing I'd ask, you'd have been on the field with a few spicy words.
Well, no, absolutely.
Did you enjoy, because I enjoyed a little bit, don't get me wrong, there's a line where things can get personal, but I enjoyed people saying a bit of some spicy words to me, and I gave a couple, and I enjoyed that.
Yeah, I used to give him a little bit of stick, but I soon stopped when Brian Lara was on 315, and I kept calling him a lucky so and so, and so you soon sort of become a little bit more rounded as you get a little bit older and what have you. But it's interesting you say that, Jeff, actually, and I think that is what Brendan has brought a lot of that to England. Remember that sort of when he was captaining New Zealand and things like that. That's what they were. They were hard. They were fair. They shook hands. They congratulated the other side. But you'd never say that they were a pushover.
No, but they were respected for doing that.
Absolutely.
And who do you have as heroes, Jeff? If you and interestingly, any from England, bearing in mind, Tuffers highlighting Lily.
Sure. Look, I mean, originally my thought for a hero, I thought Warwick Armstrong, because he's the guy who twigged. He got the idea of having two fast bowlers operate up top when he had Jack Gregory and Ted McDonald in 1920-21.
Oh, here we go.
They whitewash England 5-0 in that series.
Oh, he's digging it out.
And then come to England and win 3-0. But no one's ever opened with two fast bowlers before. They used to sometimes have a quick, and then there'd be one of those weird slow lob bowlers or a left armer from Yorkshire or whatever it was, Johnny Briggs or someone like that. That was kind of how cricket worked. And Warwick Armstrong said, well, hang on, what if we just get two and just put it up their noses from both ends? And England didn't cope with it very well across those 10 test matches in the space of about 9 months. So, that's as far as contributions to the game, having a legacy, that's right up there.
You haven't given us an England
That's
hero.
a brilliant answer. What an answer that is.
It is.
And a villain. Jeff, would that be also from...
The ultimate Ashes villain has to be W.G. Grace, because he's the one who started the whole thing off. because, I mean, look, sure, he played for 40 years and made 50,000 runs, but, you know, he didn't mind a bit of a cheat, didn't mind a bit of sneaking around behind the rules. And so in 1880, when Sammy Jones comes down the pitch to do some gardening and WG runs in and runs him out and appeals to the umpire, which, you know, nobody would attempt to do, and the umpire says, well, OK, you're WG Grace, so I guess I'll give him out. The Australians were very unhappy. Fred Spofforth came in and bowled England out when they were chasing 80-odd on the last day because he was so incensed at this bit of dodgy bending of the rules. And so that's how the Ashes were born. The fake obituary gets placed in the newspaper after that test match. So the reason we have the Ashes is that WG Grace liked to go outside the laws of the game when he felt it was his time to do so.
Look at that. We started off all nice and you know how friendly it is and respectful, and it ends with the Aussie on the show criticising WG Grace. I mean, goodness me.
Wow.
Hey, it's all in the books. That's the reason the Ashes exist.
Unbelievable.
I know.